I am Robert Hayes, 52, and I have spent most of my life building a world I thought was perfect. A world where my family and I were untouchable by the ordinary chaos that plagues so many households. I live in a quiet suburb of Connecticut, a place of manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, and neighbors who smile politely but never truly look beneath the surface, the kind of community that feels safe and proper, but suffocating in its uniformity. Before we continue the story, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And don't forget to like and subscribe to give my channel more motivation to create even better stories. Our house, a sturdy colonial with white trim and ivy crawling up the sides, has always been a sanctuary to me, a place where my three sons, Liam, Noah, and Ethan, grew from rowdy boys into men I could admire, each carving their own path with promising careers and stable lives. A testament to the life Margaret and I painstakingly constructed. Margaret, my late wife, remains enshrined in my memory as the heart of our home. A woman of elegance and poise whose smile seemed to illuminate every room, a figure I worshipped in both life and death, and whose absence has left a silence in the corridors that is almost sacred. Yet, even as I sit in my study this morning, adjusting the cuff of my shirt and sipping coffee that tastes more bitter than usual, I cannot ignore the subtle unease that has begun to gnaw at me, a faint suspicion I had brushed aside too often in the past. I remember the receipts I found tucked into old envelopes in her writing desk, small sums that did not align with any family expense, phone logs indicating calls at hours I would have thought she slept, numbers that belonged to people I never met, and whispers of conversations that hinted at secrets I was never meant to know. These were minor anomalies, things a rational man could dismiss as inconsequential, but the pattern has grown clearer over the years. And now I cannot shake the thought that perhaps the life I cherished was not entirely grounded in truth. Despite my accomplishments, the business ventures, the houses, the careful planning of college funds and summer camps, there is a shadow stretching across the foundations of my family, one that cast out over every photograph, every memory, every smile captured in our carefully curated albums. I tell myself that my sons are kind, devoted, and oblivious, that their laughter and affection are genuine, and yet I am haunted by the possibility that what I see is only a reflection of what I hope to see. A perfect family illusion constructed on silences and omissions. I watch Liam leave for work, briefcase in hand, so confident and assured, and I recall teaching him how to tie his tie, how to negotiate his first raise, how to handle disappointment with dignity, and I feel a swell of pride intertwined with a twitch of anxiety. Could it be that this pride is misplaced? Noah, always energetic, bouncing out the door to catch a morning jog, reminds me of the days when I feared he would break something in the house simply out of curiosity. And now I wonder if he too carries truths I am not ready to face. Ethan lingers in the kitchen longer, chatting softly about some project or class, the boy I indulged more than the others, the one whose laughter I sought like a balm on weary days, and my heart both swells and trembles as I realize how vulnerable I am to the secrets he may unknowingly represent. I glance at Margaret's portrait above the mantel, her serene expression staring back at me, a reminder of devotion and the comforting rituals of our home. Yet I feel the thrum of a question I cannot silence, the nagging uncertainty that perhaps she hid more than affection behind that calm smile, that the history we share is laced with shadows I have refused to confront. I am proud, yes, proud of what we built and how our boys have flourished, but I am also wary, a predator of my own thoughts, circling the truth I have avoided for decades. As the morning sun filters through the blinds, painting stripes of light across the hardwood floors, I feel the tension in my chest, the pulse of anticipation mingled with dread, and I know that today, a small, seemingly mundane act, donating blood at the local charitable clinic, may alter the course of everything I believed about my family. I dress carefully, tie my tie with deliberate attention, rehearsing the casual smile I will wear for the receptionist and the nurses, hiding the storm beneath my composed exterior. The drive to the clinic is familiar, the roads I traverse countless times, yet every turn feels heavy, charged with a foreboding I cannot name. I keep my thoughts private, rehearsing small pleasantries with strangers, yet my mind is alive with questions. What if the anomalies I've noticed in Margaret's behavior were indicators of a larger deception? Could my sons, my pride and joy, be strangers in some fundamental sense? And yet, I am also keenly aware that the love I have for them is unwavering, that no discovery could undo the bond that has been nurtured over decades of bedtime stories, school pickups, and quiet conversations that only a father and his sons share. I park the car, step onto the sidewalk, and take a deep breath, feeling the crisp spring air of Connecticut fill my lungs, smelling freshly cut grass and the faint aroma of coffee from the cafe next door. I clutch my wallet and donation card in one hand, the other brushing against the leather of my coat, a tactile reminder of the normalcy I desperately wish to maintain. As I approach the clinic, smiling at the receptionist with practiced ease, I cannot anticipate the revelation that awaits. The fracture in the mirror of my life that will force me to question everything I once held sacred. Today, the first stone will be cast in a chain reaction that will shatter the illusion, a storm I am unprepared for, yet inexorably drawn toward. And as I settle into the familiar chair, feeling the cool metal against my arm, I remind myself to breathe, to remain composed, unaware that this simple act of charity will become the pivot point of a journey that will strip away comfort, expose betrayal, and test the very limits of love, loyalty, and the moral choices a man makes when confronted with a family built on lies. I barely noticed the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft murmur of nurses greeting patients as I settled into the familiar vinyl chair at the blood donation center. My sleeve rolled up, the needle poised to pierce my vein, a routine act of charity that had never felt significant until this morning. The metal clasp of the tourniquet felt cold against my skin, and I forced myself to breathe evenly, focusing on the mundane ritual, the antiseptic swab, the sterile needle, the slow, rhythmic flow of blood into the collection bag. Everything was ordinary, or so I thought, until Dr. Henderson, a kindly man with graying hair and a meticulous manner, paused mid-sentence, eyebrows furrowed as he glanced at the monitor displaying my blood type. "That's odd," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to me, his fingers tapping lightly against the keyboard. "What's odd?" I asked, a sudden tightness gripping my chest, a chill crawling up my spine. He hesitated, then said, "Nothing for you personally, Robert. It's just, there's a discrepancy with the blood type we have on record for your son." My mind stuttered, fumbling over the words, as if they were foreign, impossible, and yet unavoidable. "Ethan?" I asked cautiously, my voice uneven, almost whispering. He nodded, eyes flicking to me with measured concern. "The type listed here. It doesn't match yours in a way that should be possible," he said, leaning closer, the corners of his mouth tight, professional, but betraying a hint of unease. My pulse hammered in my ears, and for a moment I thought I misheard. Or perhaps the machine had erred, a glitch, a minor clerical error that could be corrected with a simple retest. But the words clung to my thoughts, impossible yet undeniable. My son's blood type, Ethan, my youngest, my coddled boy, could not biologically come from me. I tried to steady myself, repeating the facts silently, desperately grasping for a rational explanation, a mistake, a mislabeling, anything that would allow me to dismiss the horror blooming in my mind. The nurses moved around me, oblivious, chatting about their lunch plans and weekend errands, and I felt suddenly isolated. A man suspended in a bubble of terror, my eyes fixed on the thin, trembling flow of blood from my arm, each drop a reminder of how fragile the world one had known truly was. I thanked Dr. Henderson, forcing a polite smile, but inside, my mind was a maelstrom of disbelief, confusion, and dawning fear. Once home, I avoided Ethan's eyes during breakfast, excusing myself to the study, pulling out old medical forms and records, scanning them feverishly, comparing them with the paperwork Dr. Henderson had mentioned, looking for some shred of error, some logical loophole, but the numbers and types all aligned perfectly, confirming the impossible. My hands shook, my vision blurred, as I realized that my worst suspicions, the faint unease I had felt over the years, the odd phone calls Margaret had taken, the inexplicable expenses, the secrecy I had rationalized, might have been harbingers of a much darker truth. I could not, would not, confront this alone, so I scheduled discreet DNA tests for all three sons, Liam, Noah, and Ethan, under the guise of health checkups and routine screenings, keeping the process silent, invisible, a shadow operation conducted in the safety of anonymity. The waiting period was torturous. Each day stretched endlessly, the mundane interactions with my son suddenly laced with a tension I could not hide. I observed them with renewed scrutiny, The way Ethan laughed, the subtle quirks Liam displayed, Noah's impatient gestures. All the things I had cherished suddenly felt foreign, tinged with suspicion, as if the very faces I had loved my whole life could be strangers. My dreams became restless, filled with abstract, distorted images. Family dinners twisting into strange tableau. Margaret's serene smile warping into a mask of deceit, my son's eyes reflecting unrecognizable versions of themselves. During these nights, I wrestled with a growing dread, oscillating between denial and a cold, creeping certainty that the foundation of my life had been built upon an illusion. The days blurred, punctuated only by the small, anonymous notifications confirming that the DNA kits had arrived, been processed, and sent for analysis. Each click of the computer mouse, each envelope opened, was a hammer blow to my composure. And then, the results arrived. I opened the first envelope, Liam's, fingers trembling, and scanned the report. The words crystallized like shards of ice in my chest. Not biologically related. My stomach lurched, a deep, visceral nausea that threatened to undo me. I could not breathe, could not speak, my mind clawing at the edges of comprehension, trying to reject what I saw. Next, Noah's results, identical in phrasing, each letter a dagger piercing the veneer of my life, not biologically related. My hand shook violently as I placed the final envelope before me, Ethan's, the son I had cherished above all. The one whose smile had been my solace, whose laughter had been my reward. Slowly, deliberately, I unfolded the paper, my heart thundering in my chest, my vision narrowing to a tunnel where only black ink on white paper existed. The words confirmed the horror I had long feared but never allowed myself to name. Not biologically related. The chair beneath me seemed to dissolve, the room spinning, and I felt a hollowing, a rupture in my chest, as if decades of life, of hope, of love, had been quietly and methodically erased in a single, unassailable instant. All the memories, the birthday parties, the soccer games, the college visits, the quiet conversations at the kitchen table, the late-night guidance and comfort I had offered. Each one became a double-edged relic, both precious and poisoned, a testament to devotion that had been misdirected, a love given freely to children who, biologically, were not mine. I could not reconcile this reality, could not determine whether to collapse in despair, scream at the ceiling, or retreat into the safety of silence. The weight of betrayal by Margaret, though she was gone, pressed upon me like a physical force, and yet, intertwined with the betrayal, there was a gnawing, inescapable love for my sons, a love that had been nurtured through years of care and guidance. Utterly unaware of the underlying deception, I realized in that moment that I stood at a crossroads. The knowledge I possessed had the power to unravel the lives of those I loved most. Yet acting on it could destroy the only family that remained intact, the only source of genuine affection I had left. The silence of the house around me became oppressive, my own heartbeat deafening in my ears. And I understood that the journey from this moment forward would be defined not by immediate action, but by the careful, torturous deliberation of a man forced to weigh love against justice, loyalty against truth, and the moral cost of both revealing and concealing a truth too terrible to be absorbed at once. My life, the comfortable suburban existence I had taken for granted, was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a labyrinth of secrets and potential catastrophes. And I, the architect of my family's happiness, was now trapped within a maze of uncertainty, fear, and moral peril. The envelope lay open before me, the stark language of science, indisputable and cold, spelling the end of everything I thought I knew about my sons, and yet, in that moment, I made the first decision that would define my course: to remain silent, to protect them, and to plan, patiently and meticulously, the reckoning that one day would come, not for them, but for the shadows left behind by Margaret's betrayal. A reckoning that would be mine alone to orchestrate. I sit alone in the dim light of my study, the quiet of the house pressing in on me, and I cannot stop myself from reaching into the past, pulling at threads I had long ignored, threads that suddenly now seemed to unravel the very fabric of my life. Margaret's desk, polished and pristine for years, holds the silent remnants of a life I thought I knew, and I sift through it with trembling hands, lifting letters tied with faded ribbons, old bills marked with cryptic notes, envelopes with postmarks I had never bothered to remember. Each artifact carries a weight, a hint of things unspoken, a whisper of the secrets she took with her to the grave. My heart twists as I unfold a letter, its paper thin, scent faintly floral, and the handwriting unmistakable. Margaret's looping script, elegant, familiar, and now horrifying in its implications. The letter is addressed to someone I do not recognize, dated years before the children were born. But during the early years of our marriage, a time I had devoted entirely to building our home and supporting her ambitions. Words on the page suggest meetings, shared confidences, intimacies I was never meant to know, and a tone that flirts with the boundaries of propriety, a dance of secrecy that had been hiding in plain sight while I labored to provide a life she never entirely shared with me. My mind reels as I scan the contents, disbelief colliding with rage, betrayal piercing the corners of memory that I had once cherished. The vacations we took, the quiet evenings, the celebrations of small triumphs, all now tinged with a shadow of deceit I cannot ignore. The bills I examine are small in isolation, but collectively they tell a story of financial concealment, unexplained expenses, and coded entries that, with the perspective of recent revelations, suggest a pattern I had been too trusting, too distracted, or too in love to notice. My fingers linger over the phone logs, the numbers and timestamps meticulous, precise, but their significance only now crystallizing as I realize they point to conversations that never included me, appointments and meetings Margaret kept hidden, her life extending beyond the domestic sphere I thought we shared. I feel nausea and disbelief, a mix of self-recrimination and astonishment, because I had spent decades believing in the sanctity of our family, in the truth of our love, in the legitimacy of the children we raised together. And now every memory seems corrupted by a silent lie. Yet the most damning, the most corrosive discovery comes when I uncover a smaller envelope, yellowed with age, tucked beneath a stack of photo albums. Inside is a single sheet of paper, folded meticulously, bearing a date that coincides with our 5th wedding anniversary, addressed not to me, but to a name I recognize only vaguely, a man connected to Margaret's life prior to our marriage, but referenced in a manner that implies continued familiarity, ongoing connection, intimacy that I had never imagined. My hands shake as I read, words of longing and clandestine meetings spelled out in Margaret's own hand, the ink smudged slightly as if written in haste, as if she feared interception, as if she already understood the gravity of the deception she was weaving. Anger rises in me, hot and uncontrollable, yet it is tempered by an ache. A grief for the years stolen, for the youth I poured into a marriage that now feels like an elaborate performance, for the nights spent comforting her, worrying over her, planning a life I now see was only partially shared. I cannot stop thinking of the boys, Liam, Noah, Ethan, the sons I raised, taught, and adored, whose love I had thought was returned unconditionally, whose identities I had assumed were intertwined with mine by blood and by bond, only to now understand that the bonds are fragile, constructed upon shadows, illusions, and unspoken truths. The house is silent, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the faint chirping of birds outside. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock seem amplified in this isolation, each sound a reminder of the normalcy that masks a hidden catastrophe. I wrestle with an impossible question. Should I confront this revelation, expose the deception, tear away the veneer of our family life to reveal the rot beneath, or should I preserve the fragile ecosystem of love and affection that exists despite the biological lies? My soul trembles under the weight of this choice, knowing that either path carries irrevocable consequences. To act, to reveal, might provide a catharsis, a confrontation with justice, a reckoning with Margaret even in her absence, yet it risks shattering the lives of the boys, perhaps forever altering their perception of me and the love that has always been real, if misdirected. To remain silent, to protect them, is an act of both mercy and self-denial, a continued investment in a lie that sustains happiness and warmth, yet eats at my conscience, a constant reminder of the betrayal that simmers beneath the surface. I hold the letter to my chest, feeling the slight texture of paper against skin. The words burned into my memory, imagining Margaret's smile, once radiant, now a haunting emblem of duplicity, and I allow myself a long, shuddering breath. The room is dim, evening creeping over the suburban landscape outside the windows, shadows stretching across the walls, reminding me that even in light, darkness can linger, unobserved, until the moment of reckoning. I look at the framed photos of our family on the mantel. Margaret laughing with the boys, our vacations, birthdays, milestones, and I feel the duality pressing down, the love I gave, the joy I experienced, and the unimagined treachery that taints every recollection. My mind drifts to the future, to decisions yet unmade, strategies I must conceive to protect the family I have built from collapse, to orchestrate a reckoning that addresses betrayal without sacrificing innocence, to maintain the bonds that matter while punishing the deception that threatens them. And in that dim, quiet study, surrounded by echoes of laughter, letters of longing, and the faint scent of Margaret's perfume lingering in the air, I understand that my life has irrevocably changed, that the past is no longer a repository of comfort, but a map of treachery, and that the path forward will demand cunning, patience, and the cold clarity of a man who loves deeply yet cannot ignore the truth, no matter how bitter it may taste. The letter rests heavily in my hands, a key to a labyrinth of emotions, a catalyst for choices that will define not only my future, but the lives of those I have nurtured and cherished. And I know with absolute certainty that the days ahead will test every moral fiber I possess, forcing me to navigate a terrain where love, loyalty, and justice intersect in impossible ways, and where every decision carries the potential for both devastation and redemption. I have become an observer in my own home, a ghost drifting silently through the rooms I once thought I knew intimately, watching Liam, Noah, and Ethan move through their routines with the ease and affection of sons who trust completely, unaware that the foundation of their lives has been quietly questioned in the recesses of my mind. Each morning I rise before them, making coffee, straightening papers, performing the rituals of a household head, all while masking the turmoil that churns beneath the surface of my carefully maintained composure. Liam leaves for work with the familiar confident stride, briefcase in hand, pausing at the doorway to nod and offer a casual, "Have a good day, Dad," unaware that my heart clenches with a mixture of pride, love, and a gnawing uncertainty that he is not truly mine by blood. Noah bursts from his bedroom a few minutes later, the energy and impatience of youth that once seemed charming now sharpened into a cruel reminder of the stakes at hand. He too, a boy I raised with devotion and discipline, now unknowingly part of a lie that stains every memory I have of him. Ethan lingers longest, the son I cherished most, my shadow and solace through quiet conversations and shared moments, unaware that the bond I have nurtured may be built on deception. I watch him laugh at something trivial on the kitchen counter, the ease and authenticity of his expression both a balm and a blade to my psyche, a reminder of the love that remains genuine even as the truth threatens to corrode it. In these silent mornings, I analyze every interaction, every glance, every gesture, measuring the authenticity of affection and loyalty, tracing the subtle currents of behavior that confirm they are devoted sons, yet feeling the icy edge of betrayal cutting beneath that devotion, for the ties of blood are absent, and I am forced to confront the duality of love built upon both truth and illusion. The nights are the worst, when the house falls into darkness and silence, when memories of Margaret and the letters she left behind swirl in my mind like a storm of ink on fragile paper. I lie awake for hours, grappling with the gnawing tension between justice and preservation, between exposing the deceit of the past and safeguarding the happiness of the present. My conscience is a battlefield, the ghosts of the life I thought I led clashing with the reality revealed in cold scientific language, the DNA reports that will not be undone. I find myself tracing Margaret's handwriting in my mind, imagining the secrets she carried with her, the choices she made, the lives she touched without my knowledge, and the betrayal stings not only for what she took from me, but for the innocence of the sons I have loved unconditionally, the moments that now carry a bitter aftertaste of uncertainty. I begin to plan quietly, orchestrating my days to maintain normalcy while probing for insights into their plans, their joys, their unguarded expressions of affection, attempting to measure how much of their happiness is real and how much would fracture if the truth were revealed. And then, during a quiet Sunday afternoon, I notice subtle signs, a flurry of emails on the family laptop, hushed conversations in the living room, clandestine trips to the local party supply store, lists of names jotted on scraps of paper. The pieces coalesce into a single, ominous picture. The boys are planning a family event, a gathering that will center on me, celebrating some milestone, perhaps my birthday or Father's Day, a manifestation of their devotion and love, unaware of the emotional tempest that rages within me. The knowledge of this event, so innocent in intention, strikes me with a dual-edged force. I am touched, deeply moved that they have organized this celebration, Yet I am also immobilized by a sense of dread. For the performance they have prepared will confront me with my own inability to share the truth, to disclose the fracture in the foundation of our family, and I realize that the coming days will be a crucible, testing every aspect of my morality, patience, and strategic thinking. I pace the length of the study, listening through the thin walls to their laughter and the cadence of footsteps on the stairs, imagining the meticulous preparation, the decorations, the food, the thoughtful touches they have orchestrated, and I am struck by the cruel irony that they are preparing to honor a father who, in one sense, no longer exists in the eyes of science, a father whose identity is legally and biologically false, yet morally and emotionally enduring. I recall each bedtime story I told, each advice I offered, each encouragement and reprimand, and I feel the weight of those years pressing down on me, a ledger of love rendered simultaneously invaluable and meaningless in the light of the truth I have discovered. My nights are filled with calculations and contemplations. How do I maintain the illusion, preserve the integrity of their love, yet satisfy a latent need for justice, for acknowledgement of the betrayal that has shaped the past 20 years of my life? I weigh the consequences of revelation against the consequences of silence, knowing that either path carries the potential for irrevocable damage, either to their perceptions of me or to the bonds I have nurtured with painstaking care. And so, I continue my silent observations, cataloging their habits, their conversations, their jokes and their sorrows, the inflection of their voices, the small acts of affection and respect, all through the lens of a man both grateful for the love still extended to him and horrified at the impossibility of reconciling that love with the immutable facts that threaten it. Each day blends into the next, a delicate choreography of normalcy maintained in the face of inner chaos, until the crescendo approaches, the family gathering, the planned event, a culmination of their devotion and my tortured contemplation. I imagine the decorations arranged with care, the food prepared with skill, the laughter and stories that will fill the room, and I feel the coiling tension in my chest, a mixture of pride, fear, and moral responsibility, knowing that my decisions in these moments will define the course of not only the celebration, but the ongoing relationship I have with my sons. The shadow of Margaret lingers in my mind, a constant reminder that the sins of the past extend into the present, and that the joy I witness in my son's preparations is both a blessing and a provocation, forcing me to confront the ethical and emotional labyrinth that I cannot escape. I sit in my study late into the night, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of a floorboard or the distant hum of traffic, and I realize that my role has shifted from protector and provider to silent observer and covert strategist, a father tasked not only with safeguarding love, but also with administering a subtle reckoning for a betrayal long concealed. The event looms, a bright beacon of affection and celebration, and I am left to navigate the treacherous waters of my own conscience, weighing every thought, every glance, every smile, every laugh, against the knowledge that the foundation of our family, once assumed to be unshakable, rests upon shadows and secrets, and that my silence, patience, and careful orchestration in the coming days will determine whether love endures, or whether revelation shatters everything I hold dear. I realized that silence alone could no longer soothe the gnawing ache in my chest, that the questions swirling in my mind demanded action, subtle and careful, but action nonetheless. And so I began to trace Margaret's past through the faint echoes she had left behind, friends she had confided in, colleagues who had worked alongside her in the early years of our marriage, acquaintances whose casual remarks might hold fragments of truth. I started small, asking innocuous questions at gatherings, letting my curiosity seem idle, watching their reactions for signs of knowledge or discomfort, cataloging each expression, each hesitation, each choice of words as if they were puzzle pieces to a larger picture I had only begun to imagine. The process was slow, painstaking, each discovery a mixture of revelation and torment. I learned, in whispers and fragments, that Margaret had been living a double life almost from the beginning, maintaining a facade of devotion while secretly engaging with others, even conceiving children that were never mine, a revelation that hit me with a ferocity that made the world seem unmoored, as if the ground beneath me had vanished and I were suspended in a cold, empty void. I could see it in the recollections of old friends who hesitated, their stories tinged with guilt or embarrassment, and in the careful way former colleagues phrased their sentences, avoiding details yet hinting at what had been, and each fragment sent a shiver down my spine, mingling disbelief, rage, and grief in a volatile cocktail that I struggled to contain. Nights were the hardest, spent in the study, rifling through papers, photographs, and emails I had archived, tracing dates and connections, reconstructing a chronology that confirmed my worst suspicions, the timeline of deception running parallel to the one I had lived in ignorance. And the weight of it threatened to crush me. For every tender memory of my sons, every shared laugh, every lesson taught and comfort offered, was now entangled with an unrelenting, unspoken betrayal. And yet, through the haze of anger and heartache, a cold clarity began to form, a recognition that the boys, their love, their trust, their affection, remained genuine, untouched by the deceit that had birthed them, and that the path forward demanded both caution and cunning. A way to navigate the treacherous landscape of truths uncovered without shattering the fragile bonds of family that still existed. I allowed myself the briefest flickers of satisfaction imagining Margaret's duplicity exposed, the knowledge that justice could be meted in silence, calculated and deliberate. Her absence shielding her from immediate consequence yet leaving me free to orchestrate a reckoning that was mine alone to administer. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten, my hands clenching as I envisioned the meticulous measures I could employ. Subtle manipulations of memory, careful presentation of information, calibrated reminders of her choices that would surface at the right moments, all without implicating the boys or tarnishing the love that had grown organically between us. And as the night deepened, the streets outside quiet except for the occasional hum of a distant car, I mapped out the contours of this silent strategy, detailing contingencies, imagining the emotional responses that would unfold like dominoes, each one carefully set, each reaction anticipated. The balance of retribution and protection maintained with surgical precision. I reflected on the years I had devoted to Margaret, on the sacrifices and compromises I had made, the plans laid for vacations, education, and family milestones, all constructed with the assumption of shared truth, and I mourned, not for the life I had built, which still stood, but for the innocence lost, for the illusions shattered, and for the knowledge that even love, nurtured over decades, could be both sustaining and deceptive. Yet amidst the anger and grief, a strange sense of empowerment emerged, the understanding that the past, though irrevocable, could be reframed, controlled in its revelation, and used to protect those I cherished while administering subtle justice to the architect of deceit. I paced the length of the study, the soft carpet muffling my steps, each turn and movement a rehearsal of patience, each breath a reminder of the composure required to navigate this moral labyrinth. I visualized the boys' faces as they went about their routines, Liam's methodical, thoughtful demeanor, Noah's restless energy, Ethan's tender expressiveness, and I recognized that their authentic love for me provided both solace and responsibility, a burden as heavy as it was precious, for I now held knowledge that could destroy or protect with a single act. As I examined old photographs of Margaret, her smile radiant, eyes twinkling, I felt a bitter juxtaposition, the warmth of memory clashing violently with the icy realization of her duplicity, and in that tension, the blueprint of my silent retribution began to solidify. I would preserve the love and trust of my sons, maintain the harmony of our daily lives, yet in the shadows, I would orchestrate a reckoning, a subtle, inexorable unfolding of consequences for Margaret's betrayal, a plan that demanded patience, precision, and absolute control. I understood, with a grim certainty, that the truth, when wielded too hastily, could harm what was most precious, and that restraint was as much a tool of justice as revelation. And so I committed to silence, to observation, to careful planning, knowing that each day, each interaction, each smile and expression was a data point in a larger strategy, a quiet orchestration that would allow me to exact balance without destroying what remained of the family I had nurtured. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the faint rustle of leaves in the night wind, all seemed amplified in the stillness, reminders that the world continued in ignorance while I wrestled with knowledge that could shatter it. And in that quiet, I allowed myself a single, resolute thought: my sons will continue to love me as they always have, untainted by Margaret's sins, and I will shape the consequences of her betrayal with the same care and devotion I applied to every aspect of my family's life, ensuring that justice and protection coexist in the delicate balance I alone am capable of maintaining. The architect of both memory and consequence, guardian of love, and executor of subtle, silent retribution. The days following my discoveries became a careful balancing act, A silent war waged in the corridors of my own home, a battle of conscience, love, and vengeance that no one else could perceive, and each decision I made carried the weight of both morality and strategy, a precarious tightrope spanning the chasm between revelation and preservation. I found myself calculating every interaction with my sons, measuring the cadence of their voices, the subtle inflections in their conversations, noting the small gestures that revealed their unwavering affection and the trust they placed in me. A trust I now carried like both a treasure and a burden, for I knew that exposing the truth too hastily would shatter the delicate harmony of their lives. My nights were sleepless, spent in the quiet of the study, staring at spreadsheets, bank statements, and legal documents, considering the smallest adjustments that could be made, redirecting funds, revising will allocations, scheduling investments, each move subtle, unnoticeable. A chess game where the stakes were years of devotion and the potential for both protection and retribution. I realized that financial stewardship, once merely a means of providing security, had now become a weapon, a tool to calibrate consequences without causing harm to those I loved, and I approached it with the meticulous attention of a man who understood that power, even wielded silently, could enforce justice in the shadows. It was during one of these calculated evenings, as I reviewed old photographs and letters, that a note arrived in my mailbox, a relic of the past that had somehow resurfaced, a familiar handwriting, a name that once belonged to someone intimately connected to Margaret, now living back in town after years of absence. I felt a surge of tension, a pulse quickening in my veins, for the unexpected presence of this person threatened to pierce the carefully maintained veil I had constructed, to disrupt the balance of my strategy, and to force a confrontation I was not yet ready to navigate openly. I walked the length of the study, feeling the weight of the letter in my hand, the air heavy with the scent of old paper and the faint lingering aroma of Margaret's perfume, and I knew that patience and analysis were the only weapons I could rely on in this moment. Any rash action would jeopardize the delicate equilibrium I had fought to preserve. I imagined the implications, the potential for exposure, the subtle influence this visitor might exert, the questions they could inadvertently or deliberately provoke, and I realized that I needed to anticipate every movement, every word, every possibility, mapping out contingencies with the precision of a general planning a campaign where each soldier was both shielded and armed. And yet, amidst the tension, I felt a strange exhilaration, the awareness that I had regained a measure of control, that knowledge and patience could be more powerful than confrontation, that subtlety could administer consequences without breaking the fragile hearts I sought to protect. I began implementing small, silent adjustments, revising financial accounts to ensure that the future I had envisioned for my sons would remain intact regardless of the past, shifting assets incrementally, observing reactions to decisions I knew would appear inconsequential to them yet subtly reinforce the structures of protection I was building. Each move was deliberate, each interaction carefully crafted, and I became acutely aware of my own transformation. From a man of routine and predictability to a strategist of circumstance, navigating the treacherous waters of loyalty, justice, and paternal love. The nights were long, spent in contemplation and analysis, the suburban quiet outside the windows a stark contrast to the maelstrom of calculations and emotions within. I visualized every conversation I might have, rehearsed responses to potential questions, considered the timing and sequence of every revelation I might someday allow, weighing the balance between safeguarding innocence and enforcing the silent reckoning I was orchestrating. And then I imagined the moment of confrontation with Margaret's past, when the visitor would appear and memories long buried would resurface. And I felt both apprehension and anticipation, knowing that the seeds I had sown in silence might soon bear fruit, that justice, though delayed and indirect, would unfold with the inevitability of cause and effect. In these long hours, I discovered a new discipline within myself, the ability to detach, to observe, to act with precision without letting emotion dictate the timing, to be both father and executor, protector and strategist, weaving together threads of consequence that might ultimately reconcile my desire for retribution with my duty to my sons. I reminded myself constantly of my dual responsibility, to shield them from the corrosive truth while ensuring that the weight of betrayal Margaret left behind would not go unaddressed, that her choices, though she was gone, would be acknowledged in the subtle architecture of influence and consequence I was building around her absence. And so, I moved through my days with a quiet intensity, observing the boys' routines, noting small changes, anticipating interactions with neighbors and acquaintances, preparing for the day when the presence of Margaret's former confidant would test my composure and the resilience of the family unit. Every decision I made, from the arrangement of family schedules to the handling of social invitations, became part of a larger strategy, a choreography designed to maintain the illusion of normalcy while subtly enforcing accountability for past deceit. I understood that the invisible war one waged within my own heart, between love and justice, between revelation and preservation, would define the trajectory of our lives, that every choice carried weight and consequence beyond what anyone else could perceive. And yet, through the anxiety, the sleepless nights, and the careful orchestration of my actions, a sense of purpose crystallized. I would safeguard the love and trust of my sons, protect the innocence of their perception, and, when the time was right, allow the consequences of Margaret's past to unfold in a manner both precise and inevitable. A reckoning delivered without chaos, without violence, and without shattering what remained of the family I had nurtured, proving to myself that patience, observation, and strategic thought could wield a power as profound as any confrontation, and that even in silence, justice could be administered with the deft touch of a man who had learned to navigate the shadows between truth and affection, betrayal and protection, vengeance and love. I have learned to move like a shadow in my own house, to orchestrate events with subtlety, planting fragments of the past where they might be glimpsed but never fully understood, allowing curiosity to bloom in my sons' minds without ever revealing the depth of deception I have uncovered. And I watch their reactions carefully, noting the flicker of interest, the brief hesitation, the way Liam lingers over old photo albums, the way Noah examines a misplaced envelope with a tilt of the head, and the way Ethan, my youngest, handles a faded book that seems to pulse with memory, unaware that every object is now a carefully positioned piece of a puzzle I alone see in its entirety. I place small items, letters, receipts, trinkets from Margaret's possessions, in inconspicuous places, leaving them within reach yet layered with ambiguity, a breadcrumb trail of curiosity that will tease and provoke thought without shattering the equilibrium I maintain. I observe from the doorway, a faint smile playing on my lips, feeling a strange thrill in the control, a satisfaction in the knowledge that subtle exposure can teach lessons without confrontation, that the boys will come to recognize the value of their father not through revelation alone, but through the unfolding awareness that the world, and the people they thought they knew, are more complex than they imagined. There is an artistry in this manipulation, a careful calibration of visibility and omission, and I feel a cold exhilaration knowing that every glance, every gesture, every small discovery will ripple through their perceptions, reshaping their understanding of family, trust, and the central role I have always played, quietly yet undeniably, in their lives. One afternoon, as sunlight streams through the living room windows, catching dust in golden shafts, Ethan lifts a small, leather-bound journal from a shelf, hidden behind the neatly stacked family albums, and the moment freezes in my memory. A heartbeat stretched across the axis of time. His eyes widen, the pages catching the light, revealing handwriting that is unmistakably Margaret's, ink slightly faded. A record of thoughts and meetings, moments I had long suspected but never confirmed. And I feel a jolt of tension and anticipation, knowing that this unplanned discovery will stir curiosity and unease, that the emotional reverberations will begin to unfold in their minds with a precision that no words from me could achieve. I hear him mutter something under his breath, flipping through the pages with a mixture of intrigue and confusion, and I watch as a flicker of questioning crosses his face, a microcosm of realization that perhaps not all is as it seems, that the past is layered with secrets he had never imagined, and yet, in his hands, the object is inert, silent, a spark without fire, until he begins to piece together its significance. Liam and Noah glance over, drawn by Ethan's murmured observations, and I note the subtle interplay, the way they exchange looks, the small furrow of brows, the tilt of the head, the tentative curiosity that begins to spread like a slow tide. And I feel the pulse of satisfaction, knowing that my silent orchestration is unfolding as intended. The house, once a haven of routine and certainty, has become a theater of discovery, a stage where every object, every shadow, every interaction is charged with potential, where the past and present collide quietly, invisibly, yet powerfully. And I am both director and audience, carefully measuring the emotional currents as they ripple through my sons. In these moments, I contemplate the nature of love and loyalty, the way trust can endure even when built upon omission, and the paradox of guiding my sons toward awareness without breaking the bond that sustains them. I recognize in Ethan's eyes, as he hesitates over the journal, the spark of recognition, the faint shadow of questions. And I know that the seeds of discernment have been planted, subtle yet irrevocable, a test of their understanding and their valuation of the Father who has shaped their lives. I feel a surge of protectiveness and cunning intertwined, a duality that defines every action I take. As I move about the house with ordinary gestures, adjusting a picture frame, placing a book on the counter, casually handling a cup of coffee, each motion deliberate, a continuation of the narrative I am composing silently around them. And in the quiet of my study, I reflect on the nature of control and consequence, the artistry of withholding and revealing, the power of suggestion over confrontation, and I recognize that the small discoveries, the subtle provocations, the orchestrated curiosities are all instruments in a symphony of justice I am conducting in the shadows. By nightfall, I am exhausted yet exhilarated, aware that the emotional architecture I have constructed is fragile, balanced between revelation and preservation, and that the discovery of Margaret's journal by Ethan is both a climax and a prelude, the spark that will ignite awareness, curiosity, and eventually, a nuanced appreciation of the Father who has guided, protected, and subtly commanded the moral and emotional landscape of their lives. I sit in the study, the house quiet, the golden light fading to a deep indigo outside the windows, and I allow myself a moment of grim satisfaction, understanding that the invisible war one have waged, the manipulation of knowledge, the orchestration of perception, the careful calibration of discovery, has begun to bear fruit. My sons are now participants in a narrative I control, their reactions unfolding naturally, guided by curiosity and intuition rather than direct intervention, and I recognize the power in this method, to educate, to provoke, to subtly punish, and to highlight the importance of my role in their lives, all while preserving the love and trust that form the core of our family. The journal, innocuous in its physical presence yet loaded with implication, rests on the coffee table as Ethan leafs through its pages, unaware of my observation, unaware of the silent lesson being imparted, and I feel a surge of emotion, a mixture of pride, vindication, and the quiet satisfaction of a reckoning begun in silence, precise, subtle, and inevitable, a testament to the patient, meticulous orchestration of a father determined to protect and to instruct, to preserve and to subtly enforce justice without breaking the fragile bonds of trust and love that define the family he has nurtured. The day of the family gathering arrived like a storm cloaked in sunlight, the house transformed into a stage where memories, truths, and subtle manipulations would collide. And I moved through the rooms arranging flowers, adjusting place settings, and overseeing the kitchen with the precision of a conductor preparing for a symphony, aware that every detail, the angle of a vase, the placement of silverware, the lighting that caught dust motes in shafts of late afternoon sun, would influence the ambience and the perception of those who would soon fill the rooms with laughter and chatter, unaware of the emotional choreography I had constructed behind their innocence. Liam arrived first, briefcase abandoned at the door, his expression eager yet unknowing, carrying dishes and decorations that bore his careful touch, and I greeted him with a smile that concealed the storm brewing in my chest. Noting the way he paused to glance at a framed photograph of Margaret and the boys, eyes softening as nostalgia brushed across his features, a fleeting connection with a woman whose presence now existed only in memory and subtle manipulation. Noah followed, his energy contained yet vibrant, carrying gifts and trinkets, joking with Ethan about the most efficient way to arrange chairs around the dining table, oblivious to the deeper undercurrents swirling beneath the veneer of domestic normalcy, and I observed them, hard-taught, measuring every inflection of tone, every glance exchanged, every small gesture of attention and care, aware that each was a testament to the genuine love they had for me, even as the foundations of our family had been quietly undermined years ago. Ethan lingered near the kitchen, fiddling with a small box I had strategically left partially open on a counter, its contents, a token from Margaret's past, a journal I had once used to seed curiosity, just visible enough to capture his attention without revealing the depth of its significance. And when his fingers brushed against it, I felt the thrill of anticipation and control, knowing that he would pause, question, wonder, and begin to unravel, in small increments, the hidden truths that I had carefully orchestrated to surface. The room filled gradually, the soft hum of conversation intermingling with the clatter of dishes. The laughter of my sons blending seamlessly with the mundane rituals of family life. Yet beneath it all, a tension simmered, delicate and electric, like the quiet before lightning strikes, and I sensed the precise moment when the emotional currents would intersect with the objects and memories I had subtly arranged, creating questions, stirring reflection, and eliciting reactions without the need for confrontation or explanation. I moved among them, pouring wine, adjusting chairs, offering gentle guidance, all while maintaining the composure of a father whose love is steadfast, whose patience is tested, and whose understanding of the emotional terrain allows him to steer without revealing the intricacies of his knowledge or the depths of his inner turmoil. The first ripple of recognition appeared when Ethan, the youngest, lifted the journal entirely from the counter, flipping the pages with a mix of curiosity and confusion, murmuring under his breath at passages that hinted at Margaret's secret life. And I watched Liam glance over, his expression shifting as he caught phrases and dates that aligned with stories I had long suspected but never confirmed, and Noah, ever the observer, narrowed his eyes, sensing the subtle tension without fully grasping its origin. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thickened with unspoken questions and tentative realizations, and I felt the delicate satisfaction of justice beginning to unfold, a sweet revenge not delivered through confrontation or accusation, but through the careful, natural emergence of truth, orchestrated to protect the sons I loved while allowing the consequences of the past to ripple invisibly into the present. I noticed the brief flickers of emotion, the pause in Ethan's laughter, the thoughtful gaze of Liam at a photograph of Margaret, the way Noah adjusted a chair as if grounding himself in the moment, and I understood that each micro-reaction was evidence of my subtle manipulation succeeding, that the seeds I had planted months ago were now bearing fruit in real time, teaching lessons about perception, the complexity of human relationships, and the enduring importance of my presence in their lives. My own pulse thrummed in tandem with the unfolding dynamics, a mixture of exhilaration and restraint, pride and grief, as I witnessed the delicate dance of curiosity, realization, and familial devotion play out before me. Every object, every photograph, every journal page, every misplaced envelope served as a catalyst, guiding their thoughts and emotions without my voice ever needing to utter the truths I had long carried alone. And I recognized in that careful orchestration the power of subtlety, patience, and strategic observation, the ability to administer consequence and provoke understanding without destroying the very bonds I sought to preserve. As the evening wore on, conversation deepened naturally, memories were shared, laughter punctuated by reflective silences, and I moved through the room quietly, adjusting a glass here, placing a napkin there, guiding the flow of energy without imposing, ensuring that the emotional revelations occurred organically, that the boys discovered in small increments the complexity of the world their mother had inhabited, and that they, through their own curiosity and interpretation, came to appreciate the value and centrality of their father. I felt a peculiar sense of catharsis, the knowledge that the careful balance of concealment and exposure had allowed me to deliver justice indirectly, to highlight the duplicity of Margaret without shattering the love that remained, to orchestrate a reckoning that was both protective and enlightening. And as I observed the subtle shifts in their demeanor, the thoughtful pauses, the gentle questioning, the fleeting glances, I knew that the invisible hand of my design had guided this moment perfectly. By the time the final course was cleared, the candles flickering softly and the golden glow of the chandelier casting warmth over the room, I understood that the cracks in the mirror of our family, those fissures created by hidden truths, had been revealed gradually, skillfully, and without harm, that the sons I loved had glimpsed shadows without losing sight of the light, and that my role as protector, orchestrator, and silent executor of consequences had been realized with precision, ensuring that the bonds of trust and affection endured even as the past whispered its presence across the table. And I allowed myself a quiet exhalation, a momentary release of tension, knowing that the sweet satisfaction of justice had been delivered not through confrontation, but through careful observation, patient planning, and the subtle, artful unfolding of truth within the sanctuary of our family home. The days after the family gathering settled over the house like a soft fog, quiet yet charged with the resonance of subtle revelations. And I moved through each morning and evening with the measured patience of a man observing the ripples of water after a stone has been cast, watching how my silent manipulations, carefully positioned hints, and orchestrated curiosities unfolded naturally in the lives of my sons. Each reaction a mirror reflecting not only their growing awareness, but also the significance of the father who had guided, protected, and shaped them without their knowing the full truth of the world behind their upbringing. Liam began to linger more often in the study, glancing at the shelves where objects once dismissed now carried weight, pulling old photographs to examine the expressions, the moments captured, and muttering thoughts that hinted at an emerging understanding of the sacrifices and vigilance I had exercised to maintain the household, to shield them from the hidden currents of deception that had flowed beneath Margaret's elegant facade. Noah, in his restless, energetic way, sought small tasks and responsibilities with a newfound respect, pausing to consult me on decisions he would have taken lightly before, as though sensing that the man guiding him was more complex and indispensable than he had realized. A presence whose authority and love demanded recognition beyond mere habit or childhood loyalty. Ethan, still my most tender, most intuitive son, approached the artifacts I had placed strategically with careful caution, eyes lingering on letters, journals, and keepsakes that hinted at Margaret's secrets, and for the first time I sensed a flicker of moral contemplation, a subtle questioning of assumptions long held, and a deepening appreciation for the constancy of the man who had nurtured them, loved them unconditionally, and, silently, steered their understanding of life, family, and responsibility. The subtlety of my orchestration had worked, and I felt a pulse of quiet satisfaction, the sweet revenge of an invisible justice unfolding without confrontation, without harsh words or overt recrimination, allowing natural curiosity, ethical reflection, and emerging discernment to administer consequence to Margaret's memory and actions without ever touching the lives I held most dear. I watched as conversations between the brothers shifted in tone, the playful teasing and casual chatter now threaded with reflection, gentle acknowledgement of the effort, care, and attention their father had provided over decades, the recognition of the depth of his presence resonating like a chord struck gently yet persistently across the spectrum of their understanding. I saw in fleeting moments how Margaret, once a central figure in memory, began to appear as a ghostly antagonist, distant and unfamiliar. Her influence felt yet morally suspect, a figure whose choices and duplicities were gradually reframed through the lens of my careful curation, so that love and loyalty toward me emerged unchallenged, unsullied by anger, yet tempered by the subtle revelation of past transgressions. The house, in its quiet corners and sunlit rooms, became an arena where the past and present intertwined, where the ethics of love, the architecture of family, and the natural consequences of betrayal coalesced into a tableau that I observed with the vigilance of a guardian and the patience of a strategist. I felt a surge of exhilaration tempered by caution, knowing that the equilibrium was delicate, that too much exposure or a single misstep could unravel the trust painstakingly maintained, and yet each subtle glance, each quiet question, each thoughtful pause in conversation was a testament to the natural unfolding of understanding, the satisfaction of ethical karma administered without spectacle, without coercion, yet fully realized in the minds and hearts of those I loved. I noted the way Ethan hesitated over a journal page, reading quietly before looking up with a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance toward me, a moment that carried gratitude. An emerging comprehension, and I understood that the boy was piecing together the moral architecture of our family, reconstructing trust and love with the guidance I had offered silently, the consequences of Margaret's duplicity reframed by my careful stewardship. Liam, in his methodical and observant way, began sharing recollections of childhood and adolescence, noting the sacrifices, the diligence, and the quiet acts of protection I had taken for granted, while Noah, energetic yet perceptive, began to mirror these reflections in his approach to daily responsibilities, each gesture, each inquiry, and each expression carrying the weight of new awareness, slowly redefining my role in their minds from caregiver to essential moral anchor. I moved among them quietly, offering small corrections, gentle affirmations, and measured guidance, aware that every word, every glance, every interaction was part of the invisible calculus, a subtle weaving of understanding, appreciation, and ethical balance, a framework where justice for past wrongs emerged naturally through observation, curiosity, and reflection, rather than confrontation or accusation. The sense of satisfaction that rose within me was tempered by tenderness, for the purpose was never to punish the boys, never to fracture their hearts or minds, but to allow them to perceive the contours of truth, to recognize the centrality and constancy of their father, and to allow Margaret's distant influence to fade into moral ambiguity, where her choices were acknowledged as errors of the past rather than present threats. And as night fell over the suburban streets, the windows glowing with warm lamplight, and the distant hum of traffic blending with the quiet murmurs of my sons discussing plans, memories, and insights, I allowed myself a long exhale, a release of tension, the culmination of years of patience and observation crystallized into a silent justice, administered naturally, elegantly, and without collateral damage to the lives I cherished. In that stillness, I recognized the power of subtlety, of patient orchestration, and of the deliberate, measured unfolding of consequences. And I felt the satisfaction of a reckoning realized, a harmony of love, ethical balance, and the unspoken admonishment of a past betrayal, carried out through the quiet, disciplined act of a father who had observed, guided, and protected his sons while allowing the truth to surface in its own time, a testament to the enduring importance of moral vigilance, strategic patience, and the silent authority of love. The house settles into a quiet rhythm once more, the faint glow of evening filtering through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the rooms that have witnessed decades of life, love, and now, carefully orchestrated reckonings. And I sit in my study, alone but not lonely, absorbing the silence like a weight and a balm at once. My thoughts drifting through the labyrinth of choices, actions, and consequences that have carried me to this point. A man tempered by revelation, by betrayal, and by the patient application of subtle justice. I look around at the photographs lining the shelves, Liam's graduation, Noah's first soccer trophy, Ethan laughing on a summer porch, and I feel the familiar swell of pride and tenderness, the knowledge that these boys, these sons I've nurtured, have grown into men of character, resilient, affectionate, and utterly unaware of the depth of the deception that shaped their origins. My gaze rests on the framed portrait of Margaret, her smile frozen in time, eyes glinting with the memory of all she once was to me, and yet the emotion that rises now is distant, filtered through layers of understanding and deliberate orchestration. She is both absent and present, a figure of the past whose influence has been acknowledged, measured, and subtly redirected, leaving space for love and loyalty to thrive untainted. I feel the loneliness that accompanies this awareness, the solitude of a man who has carried knowledge that no one else shares, who has navigated moral and emotional complexities without confiding, who has shouldered both the weight of betrayal and the responsibility of protection, and yet within that solitude, I sense a strange completeness, a quiet satisfaction born from knowing that I have acted with restraint, precision, and care, that the bonds of family have endured because I chose silence, patience, and subtle guidance over confrontation or ruin. Each of the boys comes and goes through the rooms, Liam consulting about a minor repair in the kitchen, Noah organizing a small project in the garage, Ethan lingering to discuss a scholarship opportunity, and I observe them with a mixture of pride, love, and a measured vigilance, noting the gestures that signal their respect and gratitude, aware that the subtle lessons, the quiet revelations I allowed to surface, have reshaped their understanding of me, and through me, of the past they scarcely comprehend. There is a moral clarity to this moment that feels almost tangible. Justice has been administered, not with spectacle, not with recrimination, but with the careful, invisible hand of a father who sought neither vengeance nor drama, only the balanced correction of the wrongs left by Margaret's choices, allowing consequences to emerge naturally, ethically, and with maximum protection for those I cherish. I reflect on the evenings spent planning, observing, and executing the quiet orchestration that has brought us here, and I recognize that the sweet revenge I sought was never about retribution in the conventional sense, never about punishment or confrontation, but about allowing truth to find its way through curiosity, reflection, and ethical awareness, shaping my sons' understanding of their father and the complexities of human relationships without undermining the love that forms the foundation of our family. The air is filled with the quiet hum of daily life, distant car engines, the soft clatter of dishes being washed, the faint rustle of papers, but beneath it all, there is a resonance of accomplishment, a sense that equilibrium has been restored, that love, loyalty, and familial bonds have been preserved even as the shadows of past betrayal are acknowledged, contained, and neutralized. I walk through the halls, tracing the memories embedded in the walls, the floors polished over decades, the windows capturing the changing light of each day, and I feel both the weight and the grace of time. That each act, each choice, each moment of patience has contributed to the maintenance of love and trust, that the narrative of our family is still intact, still vibrant, and still defined by the father who guided, protected, and subtly corrected the course of lives he holds dear. The evening draws on, and the boys gather for a casual meal, laughter and conversation filling the room with warmth, with ease. And I watch from my place at the end of the table, aware that the subtle adjustments, the invisible lessons, the carefully planted curiosities have borne fruit, that they recognize, consciously or not, the centrality of their father, the weight of his guidance, and the depth of his care, while Margaret's distant influence has been reframed as an artifact of history, a lesson in human complexity rather than a threat to the present. I allow myself a faint, knowing smile, the first of many small moments of release in months of careful observation and orchestration. Understanding that the family I have protected continues to thrive in ignorance of certain harsh truths, yet in full awareness of the moral and emotional compass I have provided, a compass that directs them toward responsibility, loyalty, and love without ever needing to confront the pain of past betrayal directly. I feel the quiet satisfaction of justice accomplished, of love preserved, and of lessons delivered without collateral damage. A moral equilibrium achieved through patience, strategy, and unwavering care, and I understand that the true value of family, of love, and of moral action often lies not in the revelation of harsh truths, but in the protection, nurturing, and guidance that allow relationships to endure, to flourish, and to grow stronger even when founded upon shadows. And as the night deepens, the house calm, and the suburban streets quiet, I sit in the study, alone once again, and I allow myself the final, private acknowledgement of what has been accomplished. My sons continue to love and respect me. The bonds of family remain unbroken, and the consequences of Margaret's choices have been delivered in a natural, ethical, and profoundly satisfying manner, leaving me to embrace the silence, the solitude, and the knowledge that I have enacted justice, preserved love, and maintained harmony, all without shattering the delicate architecture of the lives I have nurtured. And I close my eyes, finally, with the faintest smile of contentment, knowing that in this quiet, deliberate orchestration, the gray lines of morality have been navigated successfully, that love has triumphed over deception, and that in silence, patience, and subtlety, a man can indeed achieve both justice and preservation, leaving a legacy of integrity, care, and measured retribution that endures quietly, powerfully, and indelibly in the hearts of those he loves.